Good afternoon, Sudbury.com readers. I'm editor Mark Gentili back here with another live chat. Today we're going to be speaking with Dr. Robert Haché. He's the 11th President and Vice Chancellor of Laurentian University. This week, the university announced that it was facing a looming financial crisis brought on by a combination of provincial funding cuts and funding formula changes and, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Haché said this week that, if the stars align in a certain way, that the school's, financial viability is threatened. So I want to thank Dr. Haché for joining us today so we can explore this question a little bit more. Dr. Haché, thanks very much for your time.
Mark, thank you very much for having me this afternoon.
So, on the question of this financial viability, you said that the university is facing a financial crisis. So let's start by sort of trying to get to the root of this and how Laurentian University ended up in the financial position that it is today.
So really, most of this is precipitated by the current pandemic, the response to COVID-19, the impacts that it's had on our revenues. We were actually finishing up the fiscal year 2019-20 in a very close to balanced budgetary position, just a couple of $100,000 within a balanced budget, as a result of a number of measures that we've taken over the past couple of years to respond to the changes in provincial funding, notably the decrease in tuition that the government provided for students 2 years ago. It's taken some time for universities to respond to that. We've been no different, but we were on plan to essentially balance our budget for 2019-20. And then even though COVID hit in the middle of March, we've ended up with about a $6 million budget deficit that we're projecting now as we go to close the books in 2019-20 that wasn't there before. And that really, for a university that wasn't, does not have large amounts of reserves in the first place, that really puts us in a weaker position for 2020-21. So we now have to recover that $6 million going forward in 2021 in a situation where, the causes of the decrease in revenue that we received in March and April are still there. And we're a little bit more uncertain as to what revenues will actually be. So we have to be very careful. We have to be very thoughtful and strategic in how we organize ourselves for the next several months as we come through the pandemic.
Can you explain for our viewers and our readers how the pandemic contributed to a $6 million loss in revenue over March, April?
So let me just give you a few examples. On March the 12th or the 13th, I believe, we shut down our recreation center. The pool, the track activities, all of that was closed. That's open to the community. We have a lot of community subscribers, a lot of community groups that use those facilities. And so that's an immediate loss of revenue. Food services on campus have, as well, they were shut down very rapidly, and we derived some revenue from those activities. Residences, students started to leave residence in the middle of March. We encouraged them to socially distance and so forth. And we have refunded, from the end of March, we have refunded residence fees to students. And so that's provided another, revenue we've received that we have returned to students. So there are a lot of things like that. I think where we have done well, and what we're quite proud of actually, is that we provided all of our students with the opportunity to complete their terms, and so it's not like students have had refunds in tuition revenue because they couldn't complete their courses. There are a small number of students because of some of the outside learning requirements that have been shut down that are still waiting to complete their term. But over 9% of our students have completed terms. So that's been our focus, and that will continue to be our focus on the students and maintaining the quality education that we're giving them.
Okay. Now, so projected possible $6 million deficit by the end of this year. The communique that you provided to media this week projected a possible $9 million deficit in 2020-2021. Can you explain where that $9 million deficit comes from?
Yeah, so first I just need to correct that. It's actually 15 million.
Okay.
Because we have to add the $6 million that I've just talked about on top of the 9 million. Mm-hmm. Because the fiscal year is closed, we have to now recapture that 6 million in the next fiscal year. So that $9 million difference between expected revenues and expenditures derives from two basic features. First of all, like most universities, we were anticipating, under normal circumstances, an increase in revenue. A few more students, more programs, more activities that would increase the amount of revenue that we have at the university. We no longer think that is reasonable to project within a budgetary context, and so there's a certain loss of revenue. The other thing that we were planning to compensate for within that $9 million was the government provided us last year, Northern Universities, what's been called Northern Sustainability Grant, which is a grant to help us buffer the reduction in tuition that has happened over the past couple of years. That grant expired in 2019-20. That's about half. For us, it was about half that $9 million delta. So we were putting plans in place to cover that $4.5 million. We had plans to generate new revenues, together covering that $9 million gap. So that gap is now expanded to $15 million, and we're really, hoping that we can maintain our revenues, but I think realistically not looking to significantly expand our revenues over the next year, and therefore we have to be much more efficient in how we use the resources that we have.
Okay. Now, the tuition fee changes that the province announced and the funding cuts, how much did that impact Laurentian's budget?
So the overall impact on the budget over the last 3 years of those changes has been in the order of 7 to 10%.
Okay.
Of our budget. So it is quite significant.
Yeah, that is a lot of money. Now the pandemic, I expect you're anticipating an enrollment drop because of that?
That's really hard to predict. The first indication that we have of how things are going to happen is what's happening with our spring term, which begins next week. I don't have this week's data. Our data comes out on Fridays, but as of last week, we were at about 90% the level of enrollment that we were last spring for our course offerings. Okay. That enrollment is spread a little bit differently than it was last year, but that enrollment is doing about as well as we could expect or have hoped for the spring term. Looking towards the fall, students have so many questions of will we be back in class? How will we be delivering curriculum? Safety and security, all of that. So it's really up in the air right now. It's really hard to have a prediction that you can say is actually a prediction rather than speculation.
It's sort of a moving target at this point. Then I guess you're going to be continuing to monitor the situation as the months and weeks unfold, I guess.
Absolutely. What we can expect. Students will now be committing. They started in the beginning of April. Between the beginning of April and the beginning of August is when we get the commitments of students to come in the fall. What I fully expect is those commitments will come later. So whereas it might be evenly spread over that period of time, I think they'll be back-ended. Students will really want to understand what their options are before they commit. And I think that's quite understandable. I think that's one of the things that we're trying to stress at Laurentian is that everything that we are doing is focused on offering a full and complete fall term to our students. We're not entirely sure yet, can't be sure yet exactly what modality of course delivery we'll be able to use in the fall. But I think we've shown in the winter, in the immediate response to the COVID epidemic, we transitioned our curriculum literally overnight. And I think we were the only university in the province that was able to achieve that. All of our courses finished exactly on the date that they were scheduled to finish initially. We were able to maintain the schedule, provide the complete curriculum by different modalities. All of our courses that we were initially planning to offer in the spring are being offered. And the same commitment is there for the fall. So we really want to stress that for our community and for our students, that from the academic and course side, everything that we're doing is structured to maintain the full opportunity for students to benefit from a Laurentian education.
How could you, with all of the physical distancing and all that sort of stuff in place, with, classes and stuff being ended and that, how was the school able to sort of ensure that students were able to complete on time?
So I think it's a credit to the remarkable faculty and staff that we have at the institution. Our faculty have responded wonderfully to the need to change the modality of teaching, to increase the transfer from face-to-face to digital modalities. Our staff have been wonderful as well. I can just give you an example, perhaps. One of the areas that's particularly affected is laboratory work for students. So our technical staff and so forth have done a really great effort of converting some of the face-to-face experimental activities to virtual activities, where students, for example, can watch a technician perform the experiment that they would have otherwise performed themselves, have the data provided, have the ability to interact and ask questions, and then be able to provide the same kind of report on the experiment that they would have provided had they actually physically done it themselves. I mean, you could say that it's not 100% replication, but it's pretty close. And students are getting we're getting certainly good feedback from these kinds of activities. There's been a lot of creativity and a lot of ingenuity, and it's all credit to the people that we have at the university.
Okay. Now, international students make up a significant portion of the student body at Laurentian. What are you anticipating the pandemic impact will be on international students, on the number of international students that Laurentian will be able to attract this year? Are you anticipating an impact?
So I believe there will be. Certainly the ability to travel internationally, we can all anticipate, will still be impacted by September. And therefore, the ability of new international students to come to the university from outside the country can be challenging. We still actually have about 140 students that continue to be in our residences that we're maintaining for the summer. Most of those are international students that have the opposite issue. They can't return home at the present time. So there are a lot of international students that are still in Canada or midway in the program. We expect them will certainly have the opportunity to continue. We're working very hard with the federal government, and we're doing this as a sector to understand the challenges of international students are having with Canada. And the government certainly it has been very cooperative so far in providing international students with work opportunities, the ability of international students to participate in remote learning activities, which we've all transitioned to now. And I think the next phase of the conversation is having the government recognize and allow some of our international students who maybe cannot come here in the fall to actually begin taking their courses through the same modalities, the online learning, etc., that domestic students will have access to. So those are the kinds of strategies that we're using to try and minimize the impact on our international students. And so, we're going to, again, provide as much opportunity as possible. What's a little more difficult to predict is the enthusiasm the students are going to have for, participating in education, given the overall general angst that we have in society with this pandemic.
For sure. If there is a significant drop in the number of international students the school is able to attract, how big of an impact on Laurentian's budget will that have, or can that have?
So it can have a significant impact, but in some ways, Laurentian has about 7% international students. So to give you an idea, and they comprise probably about 10% of the overall budget of the university in terms of the revenues that we receive. So to give you an idea of the scale of the impact. So in some ways, the impact for Laurentian will be less than other universities in the sector, because there are other universities in Ontario that have 25% international students, and the impact for them will be much greater. We have perhaps less exposure, but also we have in terms of the programs that attract our international students. I mean, they come to Laurentian for a reason. We offer things that they can't get anywhere else. Right. So I'm hoping that combination of still having attractive offerings and an international student population that comes for a specific reason to our university, that will help us maintain our numbers as much as possible.
Okay. Now, the plan that Laurentian has put forth to help you balance the budget includes such things as suspending hiring, deferring and eliminating vacant positions, reducing casual, part-time, and limited-term contracts, and stopping non-essential spending. Is there enough of that you'll be able to, with those cuts, you'll be able to sort of balance things out?
I think we hope that there will. I think that's the planning that we're doing now. I think it's important to recognize, as we've changed the way that we're doing business from on-campus activities to remote learning activities, the nature of work at the university has changed. And there's a whole lot of work we used to do that we're not doing at the moment, right? So legitimately, we can those are areas that we can realize efficiencies by, in the first instance, what we're trying to do is redeploy, repurpose, allow people that presently perhaps have occupied positions that can't be done at the present time, give them opportunities to engage in work that still can be done. And as we shift to the online modality, there are certain things that we actually need to invest in to deliver the courses, the programs that we're looking to deliver. So that's our first concern, sort of reorienting the workforce, because we absolutely want to maintain as many people as we can. And because, as I've said, we have terrific people at Laurentian. We care about those people. We want them to be part of the community for a long time. At the same time, we're not going to be able to do it 100%. There are some areas where the work can't be done. We're looking at, we've talked about, I think in our release, part-time hours have decreased by about 50% since the start of the crisis. We're also looking at people that are on term contracts, and can we afford to renew those contracts right now, or is that something that we'll have to delay until after we pass through the crisis?
Could it get to the point, or are there discussions being held going beyond these measures that we just spoke about? Staffing cuts, faculty cuts, program cuts, are those sorts of things on the table?
So they're really not on the table at this time. I mean, we are looking at, various models projecting for the future and what we need to do. We have collective agreements with our faculty and with our employees. And so and we absolutely respect those collective agreements. And there are various measures there, or various terms in those contracts that limit what we can do in terms of laying people off. And so we're absolutely respectful of that. So we're working, really the approach that we've been taking is really to engage the community and soliciting ideas from around the community of things that we can do. What things should we do, and what things do you support us doing, and really trying to benefit from that wisdom, that collective wisdom. And it's really been very effective so far. Lots of very strong ideas have come forward that, so we're then able to initiate measures that we know the community supports and can get behind. And at the same time, everybody recognizes the challenges. And, Laurentian is certainly no different than any other institution or any other large business in the province.
Right. Thornlow this week announced that it had to cut a couple of programs because of its budgetary pressures, but it sounds like that Laurentian isn't at that point yet.
No, we're not at the point of cutting programs. For us, we have a governance model where we have an academic senate, which is basically comprised of professors and students. And that's the body that decides on the programs that we have. And so there has been no discussion within our Senate of reducing the number of programs that we have, closing programs. Admittedly, we're going to look very closely at our enrollments this fall, and the courses that, if we have courses that don't have students, then certainly we would not offer those courses for the fall. And perhaps even there may be, depending on how this evolves, there may even be a program or two where we simply are not getting interest this year. We may have to skip a year in terms of a new class for the program. But everybody that's in the program already, years 2, 3, and 4, absolutely we continue to offer those programs.
Okay.
I mean, we're intending to offer as full a suite of programs as students are interested in taking.
That's good. Now, we've had some sources, the budget projection by the end of 2020, 2021, deficit projection could be as high as 15 million. We've had a couple of sources say to tell Sudbury.com that it could be quite a bit higher than 15 million, that it may be double that. Is there any risk that the deficit of 15 million may be too conservative?
So we are, the $15 million figure is based on what we know today, historical enrollment trends and so forth. And so it's the best number that we can provide today, not knowing exactly what the future holds. But let me say also that this is a system-wide issue. If there is a significant decrease in enrollments, if there's a significant decrease in international students, every university in Ontario will be impacted strongly. And at that point, I mean, right now the government has been very supportive in conversations that we've had with them. They've even provided some initial support funding for COVID that has helped to reduce the deficit that we see in 2019-20. But it is a conversation as we get towards the fall that may require more active participation in terms of conversation with the government. Because if we are all impacted, if there's a significant decrease in student enrollments for the fall, I think universities as a system will be looking to the government for ways they can help. And certainly the conversations that we have with the government have already been very positive. The government is actively considering ways in which they can encourage students to continue to study. And I think because that ultimately, I think, is the solution. We want students to continue to engage in their education, to build their educational credentials so that they can have a long and successful careers. And so the conversations we've been having with the province and with the federal side is how can we work with you, or how can you work with us to help encourage and to students to wish to participate in university education come the fall, and how can we as universities do everything that we can do to provide a rich and fulsome environment for them to do that.
Now, just on the subject of the provincial government, their tuition fee cut and their funding formula changes are part of the reason that Laurentian finds itself in the financial position that it's in today. Have you found them to be responsive to the needs of post-secondary institutions as we're dealing with this COVID pandemic situation?
Yeah, so first of all, of course, the tuition changes affected all the universities. Mm-hmm. We had perhaps a little bit less flexibility than some, but it has affected everyone. I think the government has, my conversations with government, I think they're very committed to supporting the university sector. I think they want to work with us to the extent they can. I think we are also having to recognize that today, tomorrow, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, if you will, they're dealing with the exact number of cases, the healthcare system, unemployment, and how to keep society functioning at this time. And so we're not, university as a sector may not be top of mind in terms of active consideration and measures that they're rolling out. But then there's a little bit of time for that. So I do have confidence, and I think my colleagues as well, that we are having good dialogue with government. And when the time comes, if the time comes, that universities really need their help, that they'll be there for us.
Okay. Now, I just want to circle back to something you said earlier, which is, that this budget situation, threatens the financial viability of Laurentian University. Could the financial situation get so bad that, it could sink the school, or is that not something that people should be concerned about? Can Laurentian survive this, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Sorry, I lost the last part.
I said, can Laurentian survive this, I guess, is what I'm asking.
I absolutely believe Laurentian can survive this. And in fact, I believe that Laurentian will be stronger coming out the other end of this, that it has really brought the community together. People are really working for the future, for our students. And so I think we have a bright future, and we will come through this stronger than ever before. That said, these are significant challenges that we face with this pandemic. How long will current restrictions be in place? How long before we can return to face-to-face? How long can we open our ancillary facilities and so forth? All of those things are the impact of international travel. All of those things will have impacts on us, and it's just impossible to say. So I think the answer for Laurentian is the same as the answer for most businesses and institutions. Yes, if this gets really, really bad, there's always that chance. But I don't think we're there yet. I think that, as I said, we've got good engagement with government as a sector. I don't think Laurentian is on an island here. In fact, I know we're not. I think all of the other, I would say, colleges as well as universities in the province are in this together. And so I think there will be solutions that will be developed that will serve the sector well. I think, one of the things that Laurentian, I think, has demonstrated since the pandemic is that we've been able to a certain extent to show leadership within the sector in terms of the measures that we've taken as early as possible to secure the future of the university. And I think that will hold us in good stead as well.
Excellent. Dr. Robert Haché, challenging times in the post-secondary world in Ontario and in Canada during this pandemic situation, and a moving target, which makes things even more difficult. I want to thank you for joining us on Sudbury.com today, Dr. Haché, and I want to thank you, our readers, for tuning in for another live conversation. For all your COVID news and for all your other news, head to Sudbury.com. There's always something new there. And for all of us here, I want to thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Gentili.
Thank you very much, Mark.